Hi, it's Joe Morgan with the Tech Leader Spotlight podcast, where we interview tech leaders to learn about their journey and leadership lessons learned along the way. This show is brought to you by the Tech Professional Money Operating System, where we help tech professionals who know they're doing well financially, but aren't certain it's going to be enough, or rather aren't certain that they're optimize everything the right way. We help you with investing cash wisely and making the most of stock awards, minimizing your tax bill. And overall, we create clarity and confidence so you can spend less time worrying and more time living the life you want. If you'd like more information, look me up on LinkedIn at Joe Morgan at Best Financial Life. Today, I'm very excited to have on the podcast Laura Webb, who is a developer currently at a stealth startup. And she is an experienced leader who specializes in software engineering with a focus on database migration and cybersecurity. Welcome to the podcast, Laura.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
So, software engineering with a focus on database migration and cybersecurity. Tell me what does that phrase mean to you?
It's to me when I hear my experiences sort of wrapped up in that way, I think about the incredible breadth of the technology industry, the incredible breadth of the technology industry. At any given point, the needs of a company, the needs of a person, are quite varied. So, yes, I have experience with database migration. I've always maintained a focus on internet privacy, cybersecurity, and those are two very, very strong threads throughout my career.
Yeah, that's great. So let's go right into our regular questions. Tell me, what does leadership in the tech space mean to you?
Yeah, I really love that question. I am a self-taught developer. I did a boot camp before my software engineering job. I've always been interested in technology. I was taking apart my laptop the second I got my hands on it, upgrading the RAM, that sort of thing. But I didn't major in computer engineering. I majored in history.
Hmm.
And I worked at a historical nonprofit after graduation in actor and site management. Then I worked at a large art-focused nonprofit in information and interpretive technologies, and that was my first specifically technology-focused job. Um, I'm sorry, I'm slowing down because I'm realizing I'm not answering your question.
No, that's
uh,
fine.
so let's see. Uh,
So so when you think about the leadership that you've experienced in tech, what words come to mind? You don't talk about, specific people or companies or
yeah,
anything, but just
yeah.
sort of what comes to mind.
I realized I committed the cardinal sin of the history major being like, well, first we have to start at the very beginning. It's like, yes, so technology leadership. But before I was at the startup, uh, now I was a software engineer at a large FANG company, one of the more recognizable ones. In addition to my full-time job as a software engineer, I was also elected to lead the largest. Uh, we might have to take it out the word largest because I'm not sure about that. So, in addition to my full-time job as a software engineer at that company, I was also elected to lead one of the larger employee resource groups. So that leadership position included a lot of cross-departmental collaboration, very classic, a lot of goal setting, a lot of understanding the members, a lot of working together, uh, a lot of money management, financial management of a considerable annual budget, and a considerable amount of executive communication. So that formed a lot of my understanding of leadership and technology, along with the people that I admire and that I could observe both within the company and outside of the company. Um, you asked me about leadership. Uh, I would describe leadership as a skill. Uh, Sometimes it's clearly connected to a title. And also, though, I found that people can display leadership in any role they have. It can be connected to a title, but I also see it as an action, a mindset, and a perspective.
Hmm.
I
And
see.
let me just stop you there. So
Sure,
an
sure, sure, sure.
action, a mindset, and a perspective.
Yeah, and then I've broken it out into three elements that if you
Sure, go
can
for it.
picture a funnel, they're sort of going from larger to smaller.
Mhm.
Um, so I see three elements. Uh, I see three scales of leadership. They might overlap. Ideally, they overlap, but some people have a more weighted focus in one area or another. And the three that I see are leadership of a company, leadership of people. Those are different skill sets, again, with the similarities. And then there's also leadership of yourself. So, and
Mm.
I will very happy to talk about that more in depth. But with leadership of yourself, you are the person that you will be with for your entire life. Jobs come and go, roles come and go, but you are the consistent factor in your own life, and it's to your benefit to take that element of leadership seriously.
Yeah. What so tell me about that. So you're the person you will be with your entire life. So it's important
Yeah.
to be a good leader of yourself. Is
Mm.
that something that you learned along the way, or is that something that has just always been easy for you to understand and know?
That's a good question. I've found that leadership shows you your edges.
Mm.
People will tell you what you're doing wrong. They will tell you what your flaws are, what you're failing at that moment. And that's a gift. That is a very good thing to get honest feedback. There's a vulnerability and a real bravery to choosing to lead that I always want to acknowledge and appreciate. It's much easier to not lead. It's much easier to go with the flow, to not ask questions. But passive acceptance of the world as it is today doesn't feel good to me. I like to grow, I like to learn, and I know that leading includes being challenged, and I accept and appreciate that. Uh, I do have some thoughts here, sort of building from that. Essentially, that one thing I learned, let's see, sorry, some of these notes are more fragments.
Quite all right. The vulnerability is really interesting to me. You
Mm,
know, the work that Brene Brown like, became famous for many years
yeah.
ago, and um, that's something that in my career, I'm 56 years old, and until I really discovered her, I don't know, what was that, 8 years ago when that was really popular.
Mhm.
I never thought about vulnerability as being like a superpower, but it really is.
Yeah, I think sometimes if you picture a leader, try to visualize it, or picture a leader in popular media or in some of the stories that were told, it's almost sort of seen as an assignment, right? The crown is placed on the head, the sword is pulled out of the stone. But my experience as a leader is that it is a daily choice, and it is a constant listening to others. It is a constant uh, evaluating yourself, reflecting on your own decisions, reflecting on what you want to be doing and how you want to do it. Uh, I feel like leadership is daily as opposed to um, a description after the fact.
Yeah.
I do think we can. I definitely have more notes about leadership of the self. I can probably share the leadership of a company and leadership of people more quickly if you'd like me to
Sure. Yeah,
put
go
those
for
more.
it.
Okay. So I said that leadership of a company is the ability to zoom out and ask, what are we building? Why are we building it? What have we tried recently? Is it time to try something different? Who am I listening to? Where am I getting my information from? And then leadership of people uh, is one of the harder of the three. Um, you can be really good at leading a company. So describing what you want to build, describing why you want to build it. So you can be really good at those aspects of leading a company and also have some growth needs when it comes to how you lead other people. Uh, Primarily because people as individuals can bring up way more emotions than the abstract exercise of dreaming up your personal idea of a company. Other
Mm.
people have opinions, they have their own context, they have their own perspective. They might have different ways of communicating, different ways of getting things done. Shout out to David Allen, one of the original heroes of the getting things done idea.
Yeah.
How you as a leader respond to the differences around you, the very valid and reasonable reality that people are different. Um, all that has the potential to make you smarter, stronger, and actually more fun to be around. There is a playful aspect to growth. There's a playful aspect to leadership. Um, but yes, leading people is not necessarily the same thing as leading a company. And those two elements are worth thinking about.
Yeah, I really like the whole framework, leading yourself, leading the company, and leading people. And what you said about, leading people may be the harder of the three. I don't think that's true for everybody. I think there are, in fact, I know I've run into a lot of people who are really good at leading people, but had no idea about leading themselves or the company. And those people can be hard to be around in the long run, right? It feels good initially because it feels like you're buying into something, and then things don't work out.
Maybe that strikes me as a very good question to get to know somebody. Like, you're presented with these three. Which one, are you like, oh, no sweat? I've totally got that. And which one would you want to sit down and think a little bit more carefully before
That is a
moving
really
forward?
good interview question. I like that.
Yeah.
With all the challenges in the job market today, what piece of advice would you recommend for people to create resiliency in the case that layoffs come their way?
Hmm. I like that question. I was thinking about it before we met today. My biggest piece of advice is to know that you are bigger than your job. A
Yeah,
job is a business contract. It begins and it ends.
yeah,
And sometimes that ending might not be in your control or timing. That's a job. Your career, on the other hand, is something that you always own. Your education is something that you always own. You decide what you'll be learning, how you'll be resting, and what choices you'll make next. My advice is to remember the difference between a job and a career, and
yeah.
to prioritize rest when you can. A rested mind is more creative, more experimental, and more ready for new opportunities. So I uh, like, don't grind, rest.
Yeah. So remember the difference between a job and a career. And I like how you frame that, you're bigger than your job. Job is really a business contract. And then prioritizing rest. Tell me more about prioritizing rest in this context.
I would have to really search my memory, if it has happened at all, to find any sort of business article I've ever read that has been titled something about how good a CEO is at resting. I don't believe I've ever seen
Yeah.
a profile or any sort of interview where the focus is on how good a professional is at resting. Maybe sometimes taking care of their health, sometimes, wanting to extend their lifespan. Sometimes you might read some articles about that. But culturally, in general, in the United States, the focus of most of our articles on companies and businesses and individual leaders are on how hard someone is working, which is absolutely part of it. That is part of building something. And also, there's value in learning from an athlete mindset as well. An athlete is not working out 24 hours of the day. They're also resting, and that is a strategy, and that is part of how we get stronger.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. That's not something I ever would have looked at until probably the last 8 or 10 years.
Yeah,
Um,
I've started reading more memoirs, and a friend of mine has really gotten into sports documentaries. So we're also sort of paying a bit more attention to the choices that people make around the success narrative, the things that don't quite don't always make it to the article.
Yeah. Yeah. And the athlete mindset's a really good corollary to especially if your work is shall we say tedious
Mm,
in any way, which honestly all work is at some point.
mm,
Um, that rest helps you. And what you got to realize is when you're resting, you're not working.
right.
You
Mhm,
the work is still there in your head, and you're paid for what you're bringing to the world out of your head, not your manual labor. As we see more and more with, all the talk of AI taking all the
mhm.
quote unquote jobs. So rest, don't, we have this stigma that resting is not working, and I don't think that's true. It's certainly not true for me. My best ideas come to me when I'm quote unquote not working.
I absolutely agree. We, yeah, I'll just end it there.
Yeah. So, what's the most important financial decision you've made in your tech career, whether it's about compensation or equity, personal spending, whatever it is?
Another very good question. Uh, I gave this a lot of thought, and partially I hesitate to. Mm, sorry, slowing down a bit as I think again. Basically, I don't want to give an answer. Uh, I'll restart again.
Sure.
Okay, so I do have an answer for this. The most important financial decision that I've made in my tech career is to listen to financial podcasts.
Mm.
You're listening to one right now. You're already doing a great job. Um, I also want to shout out a couple podcasts that have
Sure, go for
really
it.
made an impact on my life.
Yeah.
So the first one is Afford Anything with Paula Pant.
Yeah. That's a great one.
I would listen to that on my lunch break.
Yeah.
Um,
I have a
yeah,
few objections with some of the things she says, but for the most part, she's fantastic.
yeah. I mean, that's very reasonable.
And she's
You're,
been and she's been doing it for so long
yeah,
too. There's so much content out
yeah.
there. Yeah.
Another one I recommend for people is a podcast called The Conversation by the BBC World Service.
Yeah.
This one is interesting because it takes two people in industry and has them interview each other.
Mhm.
So those conversations are often very, very fascinating because you essentially have two professionals asking each other the questions that they want to know the answer to, as opposed to maybe someone who wouldn't be as familiar with a particular industry coming
Yeah.
up with questions. So those are often very, very interesting. And then the final two are Feminist Founders by Becky Mollenkamp.
Hmm.
This is a really great blend of business building and a financial perspective. And then The Financial Feminist, which is hosted by Tori Dunlap, who is the leader of Your First 100K. And
Mm.
she puts out a lot of really great information, especially for people getting started. Uh, so strong recommend to all four of them. And again, by listening to this podcast, you are already doing something that has been very beneficial to me. Take time, listen to other people, get ideas, think about what's possible. And podcasts can really help you do that. You can listen to them on your lunch break, on your commute, go for a walk, be around the home. They're very available to people, and there are a lot of good ones out there.
That's such a great suggestion because um, with your finances, we don't learn how to handle our finances in school. We don't teach
Right.
our kids any of that. Parents don't usually talk to their kids about it. Um, and then when you are a kid and as you grow up, you don't normally talk to your friends about it, at least not in a
Mm-hmm.
truly honest way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so we're all left to figure out this stuff on our own. And the more input that you can get around what other people have done, what's worked for other people, strategies, and then of course the hard stuff like what the actual tax laws are and
Mm-hmm.
all that stuff. the more of that information you take in, the more likely you're going to find the right path for yourself, which is not going to be the right path for your friend necessarily, because it's very, very personal. But you've got to get enough information input in order to find that. And taking it in through podcasts, I think, is terrific.
Yeah, and because you can find what works for you, and get inspired, and become aware of maybe some alternatives that aren't necessarily, like you said, in the open conversation amongst you and your friends at the moment.
Yeah.
And
So
that can change too. I've been actually specifically talking more about money and more openly about money in my friendships. And that's been pretty great. A little uh, nerve-wracking to start it, but it has been really interesting and valuable and appreciated. So it's
and so
worth
when
trying. Yeah.
I'm curious about that. So when you, and I'm not interested in the specifics necessarily,
Yeah.
but when you bring something up with a friend
Mhm.
and you sort of go there,
Mhm.
what's the reaction that you get, generally speaking? Is it surprise? Is it acceptance? Do they just get right in line and have the conversation with you? Or are there people you've brought this up with who it's just clear they don't want to talk about it? I'm just curious, what reactions do you get?
Yeah, I think the beginning is important. So I don't open with an interrogation about someone else's finances. I
Sure.
would usually open with sharing information about my own, sharing
Yeah.
information about an investment or a particular stock or something else that I'm thinking about. So I'm starting by sharing my own information, my own financial information with a friend. And they are welcome to either respond or ask questions or share information of their own. But it's not a test and it's not a contest. Um, and I haven't had anybody be upset or even necessarily want to change the topic. If anything, people seem sort of come across relieved, like they're
Yeah.
glad to be talking about it.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. I believe that. That's once you break the dam, if you do
mm.
it in the right way, then you can really connect.
Because then we are talking about it together. We are sharing information together, which is
Right.
a good feeling. Yeah.
Yeah, we both feel like we're on the same side trying to solve this problem, and it's not a competitive thing. Um, that's terrific. Well, thank you so much, Laura, for spending time with us and sharing your energy and your responses. Really, really good stuff.
But you're very welcome. This has been an absolute pleasure, and thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Just as a reminder, this is sponsored by the Money Operating System, where tech leaders gain clarity and control of their finances so they can live out the rest of their lives with intention. If you want to know more about us, look me up on LinkedIn, Joe Morgan at Best Financial Life.